the reality actually is one underlying divine consciousness operating through as if 5 modes of relating to itself, but using these 5 self-modifications, giving the appearance of distinct, separate forms in a multiplicity. And this exists on all planes. Only in the physical biology you need to organize an organ to be able to experience it in this way, because this is the domain of form and rigidity of form. But in the subtle body, even that is not needed. In fact, because we are primarily spirit, secondarily mind, and only tertiarily body, the reality is our 5 senses operate even in our spiritual consciousness and can operate bypassing the biology. And so you have examples medically verified of people who can see without eyes. And there's this example which is very famous. I believe it was during the First World War, that was medically tested in France. The whole book came about it. This man could see, although his physical eyes were damaged. He could see everything normally, except when he got angry. When he was upset, he became blind. So the disturbance of energy clouded the perception, but the perception was always there. And this, perhaps, of people who train you, or you can train yourself to sense with your fingers. I met somebody only yesterday. He was describing how he had heard in one of our discussions that one can sense through fingers. He said, okay, let me test. So every day, he would go to his cupboard, feel with his fingers and try to distinguish the color of the clothes that he was picking. And he said for a few months it didn't happen, but he persisted. And after a few months he could begin to sense. The sense got activated. And now, in complete darkness or with eyes closed, he can pick the right color that he wants, sense it. Or others who can actually take a book and pass their finger over it and read the text. Or see, taste, smell, touch anywhere directly, bypassing the physical biological senses. And it's not, once you understand the principle behind it, it's so obvious, it's so simple, it's inevitable in fact. Why are we bound to our biology, we would ask. So you can see how the 5 elemental states map to the 5 senses, and there cannot be a 6th or 7th or other sense. Or in the yoga tradition, we will say there is only one sense. That is the consciousness perceiving. And that therefore is described as the 6th sense or the only sense. Mind is the 6th sense, or mind is the only sense, depending on how one utilizes the vocabulary. So this is the broad sense that I wanted to bring of the underlying principle of the 5 elements. But then I want to take it to one further step of an example of how these 5 elemental principles need to operate in any situation where there is the creative movement. Because that's the basis in which the one undivided, indivisible becomes multiplicity. Anywhere you want to move from underlying oneness to multiplicity, you'll find yourself passing through these 5 stages of self-modification, or in a more material domain, bringing together of the 5 elements to make for the completeness of the creative process. Now, you can explain this in numerous examples within yourself, within your working of your body, within the working of a concept, of your mind, of a project. You'll find all these elements need to be brought together. But I will put it in a context which is perhaps more accessible to us, in what I would call the learning process. Or in a more conventional sense, they will say teaching process. But it's never teaching, because you can never teach something, you can only learn something. So in education, Sri Aurobindo makes this observation that nothing can be taught. That's the first principle of true teaching. Try to teach someone, but the person can learn. And your role can be to assist their learning process. In that sense, you can be a teacher. But you cannot teach without the other side being ready to learn or capable of learning. So the learning process itself, you will find inherently has a mix of these 5 elements coming together. And I'll put it in this way. And if you look at the analogy, the symbolism becomes quite obvious. First of all, you will find there is the... Okay, let me follow the sequence then. From below up, the earth. Earth is the student, the learner. The earth by itself is as if somewhat rigid, or dry. You need the water to come into the earth. Now you'll see how the parallel is to planting of a grain in the farming cycle. You'll find the same things happening, but we'll describe one and you'll see the ripple in the other. So earth needs to be softened with the water coming in. And so the student, the receptive base, and there is at that point the assistance of the teacher, we might say, who creates that sufficient nourishment of the basis, softening it up, giving it an ability to become malleable to the touch of that shaping clay, we might use the analogy. And then, when the water has softened it sufficiently, the love of the teacher, you might say, there comes the action of the knowledge itself. And knowledge is quite independent of the teacher. A teacher might try to teach you something, but you might grasp far more than what the teacher could convey. Isn't that happening often to us? So it shows that the teacher at that point is at best a mirror reflecting a knowledge, the light, the fire, reflected. And if you are a good reflector, you don't need to know what you're teaching. You just become the link through which the knowledge itself transmits far more than you could even perhaps have known or been able to transmit. So the fire principle becomes the knowledge itself. The air touch becomes the means by which this transmission takes place, this interaction. And the ether principle is the environment in which it takes place. If the environment is not free, clear, open, lit up, bright, nothing meaningful can take place. So in any creation, in any action, first set the environment right. The environment must be conducive to that which you seek to realize. I'm going to now jump across many images because that's one way to get the big picture. Look at the space when you are going to go farming. If the environment itself is not set right, it is poisonous, it is confused, it is chaotic, aggressive, you will not have a free flow of growth. Well, the same thing for the student. If there is not the openness and a freedom to play, including the freedom to make mistakes, you cannot really learn. It's an inherent truth of all education, of all learning, that you must have the freedom to make mistakes. So this wideness which comes with the ether principle, freedom. Into that, you have the air principle, very materially, the fresh air and openness, but the interaction, the exchange, free flow of experiments, of play. And of course, in farming, it is literally the physical air. Into that comes the knowledge itself. An environment can be imbued with knowledge or can be imbued with something totally different. I don't know if you have had this experience when you enter a school space. You can feel in the air whether there is a meaningful learning taking place or not. You look at today's cinema, Hollywood particularly, of a college space. Nowhere do you see knowledge. You see only people having all kinds of strange emotional excitations, attractions and repulsions and drama. The air, the environment is now filled with this, not with knowledge. You go into that space, you'll be sucked into the play of energies of emotions, pulling, pushing, and exciting. But when you enter knowledge space, your mind opens up and somehow it's easier to know, easier to learn. You've experienced this. There's a particular place in the Sri Aurobindo ashram, in the main building, there's a room which is called the reading room. And the mother put a special formation there which allows you to receive knowledge more easily. You take the same book, go into that space, sit and read, and you'll find that the download is much more complete. Interesting. And such can be the space created where knowledge is this thriving presence, dominating influence. But of course, knowledge is also that thing, the fire principle, which is, because of the nature of the fire, lighting up, purifying, transforming the student. Having gone through the process of learning, of knowledge, you are not the same person. Fire has recast you, reshaped you into something more. The water, which was initially there to assist, after the fire's action, entirely is evaporated. There is nothing left of the teacher's support. The student is now baked into the new form. isn't it? So you see these very interesting analogies and symbolisms involved in the soul play. Ignore any one of these 5 elements, and the education will be either incomplete or ineffective or very laborious and difficult. Look at the same pattern of 5 in planting a seed in the field. Take out one of these 5 and you'll find the seed will not sprout, or the tree will be stunted or distorted, etc. Well, within us, the same 5 elemental principles are operative, and it's a way of looking at it that we are not just the biology, we are equally subtle bodies of various degrees or gradations. And you will find this interestingly in the yoga tradition. They speak of 5 bodies: the annamaya, material; pranamaya, which is life force body; manomaya, which is a mind consciousness body; and then above that 2 more, which are the vijnanamaya, which is described wrongly today as intelligence. It's actually the supramental consciousness, the divine intelligence, the divine creative power that we spoke of before. And then the 5th body is the anandamaya, the bliss body. Again, wrongly described today and reduced to a sensory, sensational happiness or such. It is something much more fundamental. And Sri Aurobindo observes the last 2 are not yet organized in us. They exist as planes of consciousness. This is the domain of Satchidananda, not yet organized and individualized as bodies. And therefore, we are unable to be conscious on those levels, although those levels exist and a part of us is there. We are there. We are more truly there. We are truly divine beings. But because those levels are not organized and integrated, we are unable to be conscious, but we can enter those states in a state of samadhi where we are unconscious to the world. But when these bodies are sufficiently formed and developed and integrated, we will simultaneously live on all these planes at the same time. Why 5 bodies? Well, for this reason again. The 5th is the Satchidananda itself, and so the 7 is as if reduced to 5 because that is a single body. But I'm coming to this because this is very important for us to understand. The relationship of the 5 bodies actually maps to the 5 elemental states. Because it is the earth element which predominates in our gross physical body. It is the water element which predominates in the life force body. It is the fire element which predominates in the mental body, and so on. But you notice in the vocabulary of yoga, the words themselves are so precise. The words articulate, just as we spoke earlier about the b and the bh and the brahman, etc. The words are always rooted in a creative principle or power. The language itself is an expression of a deeper truth.